personally. I'm less about a goal and more about a purpose. I feel like in my corporate life, I worked for some wonderful leaders and I also worked for some not very wonderful.
So you became a coach to help people, but no one told you how to build the business behind it. Welcome to Coach as Entrepreneur, the show for coaches building real businesses with systems, strategies, and heart. Build the systems, serve your clients, support your family. This podcast is for coaches, consultants, and purpose-driven professionals who want to grow their business without the overwhelm. We focus on real stories, the wins, the struggles, and the systems that help coaches build sustainable practices. Today, I'm lucky enough to be here with Mel Rosenthal, who is a coach, mentor, and writer based in Melbourne, Australia, working globally with founders and executives navigating the complexities of growth and leadership. With over 4,500 coaching conversations and 15 years leading product, marketing, and innovation teams, Mel brings what she calls informed curiosity, the ability to spot patterns others miss and challenge with care. She's trusted by leaders at purpose-driven companies and major institutions, from Who Gives a Crap and Ship It to Peter MacCallum Cancer Center and the University of Melbourne. Mel is the creator of 52conversations.com, a card game designed to spark meaningful dialogue, and is currently writing a book on the emotional landscape of adult children navigating a parent's dementia journey. Grounded, commercially savvy, and deeply human, Mel helps leaders find clarity without avoiding the hard things. Mel, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for asking me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So I am very excited to be here with you because we've had already several engaging conversations and you're just a joy to speak with. So thank you so much for being here. So Mel, I'd love to get to know you a little bit more. We glossed over in your intro some of the things that you've been doing and been a part of. But could you explain what you were doing before you got into coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey before I was coaching was one of corporate leadership. I was leading teams in Australia and in the US, working in finance and insurance and looking at how to bring financial products to customers in a way that was resonant for them. That was sort of the focus, I guess. It was asking questions to solve problems, which is probably the link for me back to coaching, really, was being interested in people, what motivates people, what engages people, what makes them be successful, feel successful, and helping them achieve that in one way or another.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I think so. So you were kind of doing that in your corporate position, and then how did you find out about coaching and start kind of getting your feet into that world?
Yeah, I had a very insightful boss. I had moved across the world. I'd moved from San Francisco to Brisbane, Australia. I didn't know anybody in Brisbane, and all of my peer group at that time in this new role were in other cities. So I didn't have anybody around me kind of as a support structure in a peer group. And my boss at the time said to me, you're in a new industry, in a new city, and everybody that reports to you is about 15 years older than you. It might be good for us to give you some support. How would you feel about having a coach? And if I'm honest, I didn't really know what that meant. I was, always somebody who would accept help and guidance and, was very grateful for the idea that someone would be thinking about my welfare. And he said, I think it could help you. And I said, I'll give it a go. And it was wonderful. I worked with an incredible coach who helped me think about my work and my life and all of the things that were important to me, and helped me change my perspective on a lot of things, helped me really clarify things. I went, this is a really cool thing that this person does. And I worked with her for a couple of years, and over that time, as I was rethinking what I wanted to do, it became clear to me that some of the things that she does were some of the things I was already doing in my corporate role.
Hmm.
And the more I thought about it, I thought, actually, I want to make that the primary thing I do, not the secondary thing I do. And here we
Yeah.
are.
So that was a very natural progression for you because you were doing so you went to school, you got a degree, and then you got your job and you're doing that. And then because of your boss, he found you a coach who could help you because especially when if your direct reports are that much older than you, and it's a weird dynamic. Not that, um it should be weird, but it is just because of the age gap. Um
And there was another piece
be-
in it too, which was they were all really technical. So if you think about insurance and
mm,
you think about the technical underwriters who decide on, what who can be insured and at what price they can be insured and all of those sorts of things, they were expert in that and they
yeah,
had decades of experience in
right.
that. And I had none. So I had kind of a credibility gap to close with them to be able to say, I'm not here
Uh-huh.
to be an underwriter, I'm here to be a leader. And so
Right.
that, as well as the age gap, was, I think it was a complex constellation to navigate as a relatively young leader.
Yeah. Uh Not to go too much into my own story, but I've had similar experiences and also um because I've got like great parents and genes, I also look quite young. And so I've always had a little bit of a hard time when it came to uh being seen as a subject matter expert in certain
Hmm.
areas because of the notion of what do you know? You look like you're 12 years old or,
Hmm.
20 years
Yeah.
old. Um but that's fantastic because you were able to meet somebody who was coaching you and helped you kind of go through all of that. But then also through that, you realized, oh, there's this other thing.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. It
very,
was it was a nice it was a nice progression.
mhm.
Yeah. Um,
So very serendipitous for you.
I think I absolutely think so. I often look back at that and wonder what would have happened had I not been offered that opportunity, had I not met that person, had I not taken that time and invested in the process in a way that was kind of deep and real to go, well, how do I make the most of this and what can it do for me? If I'd just kind of gone through the motions in that process, I suspect we wouldn't be here.
Hmm. Do you want to talk about your leap into coaching? How did you, when did you decide I'm done with corporate? I want to go into this thing called coaching.
Um, I don't recall a moment. I can recall a period of time. And it's funny. Like the job I had, well, the last corporate job I had was pretty intense, or it was intense for me. I think there's lots of reasons
Hmm.
for that, which were about me and maybe not being in the right role at the right time. But my grandmother passed away, and I took some time off for funeral and mourning, and to spend some time with the family. I took about 10 days, and I travelled to see family to do that. And I think that
Yeah.
distance, that physical and mental distance away from the energy of the corporate job actually gave me space to think about what I
Yeah.
wanted to do next. And so it's you know
Hmm.
it's sort of a sad thing. One thing ended and something else began, and in ways they're
Yeah.
unrelated, but in some ways they're very very related.
Yeah. I don't mention this often because it's like, it goes into like, oh, that's sad. But also, my father also passed away, and that was a reason why I took time off because I was working in the States in Chicago, and then I took 3 months. Well, I quit my job, and I was just like, I'm gonna kind of just take some time
Yeah,
off. So I came out to Korea at that time, and then
and never
I
left.
just never went
Yeah.
back. Yeah, but it's yeah, it's those moments and those times when you start to question and think through, like, and reflect.
Mhm.
What is it you want your life to be about, and what's that purpose? Um, Completely understand.
Yeah, and it's very much about purpose, and it's also about structure too. Like for me at the
Hmm.
time, the corporate expectation of hours and like it wasn't the same. We're talking about 2007. It wasn't the same always on culture as I think we have now that technology has created, but there was still an expectation of long hours and commitment and things like that that made me pause and go, I don't think that being a kind of a slave to the expectations of others is how I want my life to be structured. And so, the natural progression from there is, well, if not that, then what? What does that look like?
Then what?
How do you make that? How do you decide what you do want it to look like? I think it's very easy in those moments to say, not that, but much harder to then
Yeah.
go, if not that, then what? Which is where the work is, right?
Yes. And it's a difficult transition, especially if you really don't know what it is that you want to
Yeah.
do. But because of your experience with coaching and you kind of had an idea of where to go.
I did. And I also had sort of long, like family influence in the sense there were some entrepreneurs in my family who, and I'd
Okay.
seen how, they had worked to bring their creativity, their innovation to bear in
Hmm.
creating things. And had always had a little bit of that kind of burning thing in me to go, I want to create something that's mine. So that was like, there are different threads that all of a sudden come together. You go, I want something that I've created that's mine. I want freedom. I
Right.
want autonomy. I want, and I want choice. I want to be able to choose the things that are interesting, that are a good fit for my skill set, where I work with people who are doing good. Like, all of a sudden the list starts to unfold and you go, well, what am I left with? And you go, well, actually, it's not what I'm left with. It's this thing where I go, I now have a picture of what I want.
Yeah. I mean, and that's fantastic when you are able to bring all these different points in your life, and then you can bring them together so that they intersect in this business that you find purpose in, right?
Absolutely.
Did you feel like, because I feel that it's not easy for people to, like, one, maybe they can see that and start to like bring that together, but as you were building your business, could you continue like bringing all of those things and making that come through? Do you know what I mean? It's just like it can be, you can see all these things, but then actually in the implementation of it, how did that?
It's even now. So, like, I've been doing this 17 years or something, something. Even now, regularly, I have to stop and calibrate and go, are the things I said I wanted still the things I want? And is the way that I'm working still giving me the things that I want? Like, is the match still there? And how do I need to adapt and change to make sure? So there's like, I think it's the furthest thing from a set and forget, right?
I really want to come back to this point, because this is a very important point that I think not just coaches, but people in general, we
Mm.
lose because we don't take the time to sit and think and reflect.
Yeah.
And we're so much, especially in our society today, we're so much about the go, go, go.
Mm.
We got to succeed. We got the family. We got to do this and this and this. And then so many different things that are competing for attention beyond the phone where you're just scrolling all the time, that
Yeah.
sometimes where we start and where we end up, when we look back at where we ended up, it's not where
Not where we
we
thought.
ever
Yeah.
thought. Yeah, for good or bad. And so, yeah, I would love to, let's talk about that more in the next part, because this is a very important part for coaches,
Hmm.
because um yeah, not just coaches, but in general, it's just very important. So when you started getting into coaching and you left your corporate job and you got into coaching, can we talk about like the first 2 to 5 years? How how did you go about building your business, developing it? What were the challenges that you faced?
Yeah. Um, the 2 to 5 years is a really like it's really big, right? It sounds little,
We
but
can go.
it's big. I break it down, I guess, a little into some smaller chunks. So for me, for example, I said I'm going to give myself when I started, like kind of day one. I said
Yeah.
I'm going to give myself 6 months, and at the end of 6 months, I'm going to see whether I've got signals that tell me this is working. I've got signals that tell me I'm enjoying it as much as I thought I was going to enjoy it. And whether, there was sort of a go, no go decision for me that I'd set for myself at the 6 month mark. And, thankfully, I'd had some nice work come in those early months. Certainly not in the first few. Like it took a while to get some rhythm, but I had good, loyal folks in my network who understood what I was trying to do and could see the value in it and gave me a start, which I'll always be
Cool.
grateful for. Because that gives you
Yeah.
the storytelling, right? So much of what we do when we're selling what we're doing is about storytelling. And if you haven't got, I saw a client yesterday who was talking to me about it's really hard to do
Yeah.
the storytelling. So you need some early seeds of stories, I think, to give you momentum. So once I kind of got through my first 6 months, and that first 6 months, let's be honest, it was a who do I know? Who can I call? Who can I have coffee with just to tell them what I'm up to now? Hey, you used to know me as, Mel, the product manager. Now I want you to know me as Mel, the
Hmm.
coach. And, it was simple as
Yeah.
that. So there was just a
Yeah.
lot of that. Probably the first 12 months were really all about that, repositioning my
Yeah.
personal brand.
Right.
From there, and it's really, you really have to take advantage of opportunities, right? And you have to kind of back yourself, I think. I can
Hmm.
remember sitting in front of my computer, like really early days, and I got an email from one of the airlines here in Australia that was like, you know, flights Melbourne to Adelaide, $50. And I went,
Hmm.
there's a couple of people in my network that I used to work with who live in Adelaide. I'm going to go to Adelaide. And I booked the flights, and then I
Uh-huh.
emailed them and said, I'm going to be in Adelaide on a Wednesday. Can we have coffee? And, you know, as luck would have it, one of those people was the CEO of a company now. He wasn't when I knew him, but he was at that point. And he said, we're
Sure.
trying to build out our leadership development capability across the company. And I think coaching could be a really interesting part of how we do that. I want to introduce you
Yeah.
to my, head of organizational development. And that turned into 5 years
Okay.
worth of work, right?
Wow.
Different projects, but if that was
Hmm.
5 years worth of
Yeah.
work from just that opportunistic putting yourself in front of people, right time, right place,
Yeah.
lots of luck, lots and lots of luck,
Hmm.
but you make the luck by putting yourself there.
Yeah. You give yourself more opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Um,
So that's the
and
story of the early days, I think, is prospecting.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wonder how many coaches put themselves out there to do that, because so it's all about creating visibility for yourself, as a coach now and as a business, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't create the visibility, people don't know you're
Mm-hmm.
there doing what you're doing
Mm-hmm.
now. And it's not that they don't care, it's they're also doing their own thing,
Yeah.
right? And so unless you have to be your own cheerleader and be telling people, hey, I started this new thing. Let's talk about it and let's have a conversation. And maybe somebody who needs my help,
And I'm not even sure, David,
right?
that it needs to be that. I think, if you start with the people who know you and trust you,
Hmm.
even if the trust that they have in you is for something that's different than what you're doing now. But they trust you enough that if you
Yeah.
say, I'd like to tell you about something that I'm doing and I'd like to hear what you're doing because it's been a while, right?
Yes.
Then,
Yeah.
then I don't even think it needs to be, I want to know whether you've got any opportunities for me to do work for you. It's more, let's get together, let's reconnect, and
Hmm.
maybe we'll find ways to help each other.
I love that because that's about the relationship and the trust,
Mm-hmm.
right, that you have with people that you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, and yeah, and especially with those relationships, you don't want to be forcing yourself on them. And so I agree with that. On the other side of it, I do think that if you are trying to build your business, though, for coaches, they need to be more willing to put themselves out there and say, "Hey, I am doing this thing," because I feel like a lot of coaches are less, or maybe for whatever reason, are still trying to figure out, like, or are afraid of just saying, "Hey, I'm doing this new thing."
Mm,
As someone who's also building their business, like most of my extended family back home, they have no idea what I'm
yeah.
doing, and it's just, oh, David's in Korea doing this weird thing, and he was working with a coaching company. It's coaching, like, so it's yeah.
The one thing I will say about, that kind of prospecting, that approaching phase
Mhm.
is I would have gone about it very differently if my goal was to
Mhm.
build a coaching company.
Okay.
I wasn't trying to build a corporation that had 50 coaches servicing thousands of companies. I was trying to build a viable and still want a viable coaching practice where the people who buy
Mhm.
coaching from me buy me and they buy what I
Mhm.
deliver. So it's one to one.
Yeah.
Like I was not trying to
Yeah.
do one to many, even though my background, in kind of
Yeah.
marketing was one to many. But I
Right.
think the key there is to say whatever version of prospecting that you land on for
Mm.
your coaching business, I would say make it match your goal. If your goal is to build a coaching company, go about it that way. If your goal is to build a practice, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you for bringing up that point, because that is an important distinction, right? Is, as a coach, what kind of what kind of business do you want to build for yourself? And it's not like when you start, let's have what's my 5 to 10 year plan, but what is your aspirational goal for this thing that you're doing? Because I feel like if you have a goal in mind, you're more likely to attain that goal versus, oh, I'm just going to get into coaching and something will happen.
Yeah. And I got to say, I'm probably just personally, I'm less about a goal and more about a purpose. And the distinction I make, so for me, I feel like in my corporate life, I worked for some wonderful leaders and I also worked for some
Mhm.
not very wonderful leaders. I've got some battle scars, right? Many of us have battle scars. I am not alone in that at all. And my purpose when
Yeah.
I started was all about how do I make the next generation of leaders not have to experience the bad stuff I went through? How do I make, the kind of that waterfall of impact through future generations, make it so that they all have better experiences? And that is still a
Mm.
core part of why I do what I do, because it doesn't have to be bad.
Yeah. I totally agree. And that's why I had been working with the coaching company here in Korea. Because you spend so much time at work, you spend more time with your coworkers than your family.
Mhm.
But then if you're miserable all the time, then most of your life is miserable. Why do we have to live like this? And who's making us miserable, or what's the situation that's creating that? It often is influenced by the leaders in our organization. So if we can make these people better people, then what is that cascading effect within the
Yeah.
organization, right? So
And, it evolves over time too. So if I think about the clients I worked with on day one, it'll surprise no one that my clients were in
Cool.
finance and insurance, in banking and insurance, because that's where I'd been working. That's where my network was. That you hunt where you've got good opportunity, right? And over the
Right.
years, I've been able to, I guess, move the core of my practice to different spaces like medical research, like cybersecurity,
Good.
where in some of those segments, you've got highly technical people who train to be brilliant technically and who aren't
Mhm.
necessarily equipped with the leadership training that is afforded to people like me when they go work in a bank. So there's opportunity to create learning and create experiences through coaching for those people doing great, important work for things they've never seen and heard of before.
Yeah. And I think that is such important work because so often I think that your manager, when you were back working in insurance, was someone who really had, you were really lucky to have,
Mm,
because that's not a common offer of support most of the time of, hey, I think because you're in this situation, we should get you coaching.
mm,
I feel like most of the time when people who are promoted to these roles, they were promoted because they're intelligent, they're good at their job, they know what it is that they're doing, and they're not necessarily hired because they're great leaders or managers,
mm, hmm.
right? But now they have to become leaders and managers. And if they want to succeed at that role, how do they do that?
Yeah. And sometimes you get lucky and somebody's got this really kind of natural inherent ability. Sometimes they have had wonderful leaders and kind of through osmosis or through intention, they've observed what that person has done and they've kind of taken it in and copied it. And
Yeah.
sometimes and that can work well for a really long time until they hit a
Yeah.
scenario they haven't seen before. And if they haven't kind of got the frameworks, the ways to think about things, the mindsets to guide them through it, they get stuck. And that's a great
Really.
place for coaching to kind of come in and help them move
Yeah.
through the stuckness.
But the question I have is, what percentage of leaders, managers who are promoted into those positions are that group of people who have, for whatever reason, that late innate talent for leadership or management? And
I think we all have it in us. I don't know that,
Mhm.
and I think we're all capable of it. Because because if you break down what it's all about in terms of kind of empathy and
Yes.
vision, and if we went through all of the checklist of things great leaders can do and can do,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but the ones who come to it and feel like they were born to do it, like you see them and you're like, oh, they're just so natural. They're few and far
Mhm.
between. I don't know what the numbers are. Most
Yeah.
of the people that I observe, most of the people that I work with, work really
Mhm.
hard to be good at it.
Yeah. And I think that's what's important, because one is, I want to just highlight that a lot of great people are put into these positions, and that they're more than willing to work at it, but they need to be given the support so that they can
Mm,
be really great and amazing leaders and
mm.
managers. And I think that's what you're doing, which I applaud, because that's great. And I think that's what coaches do, right? Is they come in and they help these people and elevate them to a level, that's why they're called coaches,
Right.
right? You have, Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, all of these people, great athletes, had
Mm.
coaches. Those coaches, they saw what was going on and they could see how they could help them and what to work on and to how they can grow to become better.
I was going to pick up your point, your question about what percentage of people have that kind of innate talent for it. I think where we trip ourselves up often is we look at someone else who looks like they're doing it easily. Right? It looks
Mhm.
natural. And my observation about that is often, even when it looks natural, it's not. Like, it's kind of the duck on the water thing. Like, on the surface, it all looks
Yeah, yeah, of
smooth and
course.
easy. and underneath they are paddling hard to make it work. So I
Yeah.
would say let's not assume that even the ones who look like they're doing it easy are in fact doing it easy.
Fair point, right? Because as we grow up, we have our experiences where some of us are put into those positions where we have, like, maybe in middle school and high school you were, the student class president, or you were doing these clubs and you were doing that. And so through the experiences we gain those, those qualities or those learnings because we've, for whatever reason, we've challenged ourselves. And that is also part of what makes us who we are when we get into those workplaces. I was reminded the other day that when you coach a professional, you're not just coaching them for professional skills. You need to coach them as a whole being, because it's not just like they're half, if they have a family problem or if they have an external issue going on, that impacts their behavior at work or their interpersonal relationships and communication skills or whatever. And so what makes great leaders is a lot of different things that come into it. So
That's a really good point too, about people's lives and the kind of the scope of coaching. People often want to know when you meet them for the first time, like, what kind of a coach are you? Are you a life coach? For people who aren't in the business world, often the question is, oh, you're a life coach. No, I'm not a life coach. Oh, so you don't deal with the things that are going on in somebody's life? Well, when you believe that, you're coaching the whole person, which I do, you
yeah.
can't ignore the life elements. But the focus becomes what is the impact of those life elements on the work and on them as a leader at work, as opposed to what are you doing about, the fact that you're not getting along with your wife or your husband. That's a whole different
Mm.
element of,
Yeah.
and people, people bring that to the room, right? It's there.
Mhm. Yeah.
But it's not, that's not my job.
Yeah. I think it's a factor, right? It's you have to help them recognize that is something that's influencing them, but then also to be, that's not my job, but you recognize that there, and you have to kind of, maybe they just need to learn how to compartmentalize it. I don't know, because you would know better, but it,
I think for me,
you
it's,
just have to help them kind of.
yeah, I think for me, it's about helping them recognize what impact it's having, and how to be kind
Hmm.
to themselves when there's really important stuff that's happening to them, for them, outside of work, to be able to say, this is going to have an impact on how I show up at work. What impact is that going to have? What support do I need from those around me? It's okay that I show up differently because this is important. So I think there's a kindness, an empathy, a recognition, and I guess processing all of that in the context of work is part of the job.
So through your experiences, could you share like one or two stories of the impact that your coaching has had on somebody's life that you've coached?
I find this question so difficult because I feel like my perception of the impact that I've had on someone is much less relevant than their description of the impact that I've had.
Hmm.
I think there's different people who have come to me with aspirations of progression and promotion, and when they achieve it, they'll talk about how grateful they are and that the skills that they developed and the mindsets that they developed through coaching have helped them attain promotion, or clearly like a gap. They'd be getting feedback about a development area for years and years and years. Every year in their performance appraisals, something was a recurring theme, and through coaching, we were able to kind of take that off the table. They were able to close that gap. Um,
Hmm.
People that actually didn't understand, so highly technical people who didn't understand that the way that in fact that they were a leader, somebody who runs a scientific
Hmm.
lab, who was all about
Yeah.
the publications and the scientific results, but had conflict in the lab environment all of the time, and suddenly was then
Mhm.
able to go, hang on a second, there are things I'm doing and things I'm not doing that are contributing to the dynamic in this place. And that is impacting our ability to deliver the scientific outcomes we want to deliver. If I change my behavior, that will impact the culture of the team and that will impact the outcomes of the team. And so those kind of moments where someone says to me, oh, I've realized the part that I was playing. I hadn't realized the part that I was playing in creating that. That I go, my work here is done. It's not, but
Yeah.
but the first
Right.
step in my work here is done. So,
Yeah. Because you're helping them to understand and realize their influence in the environment.
because often, the way those things present are, these two people can't get along. I'm going to have to fire one of them, and
Mm.
that's where it starts. And you go, well, okay, well, how are you responsible? In what way are you responsible for creating that dynamic? What? No, it's them. They can't get along. So,
That's so true. Um, just reflecting on previous work experience when there was a conflict between two parties, how was it resolved? And it's generally like, oh, there's a problem between these two people, as you said. So one of them needs to leave. But it's also a question of what's the environment that's being created and how are the people in that space also contribute to that.
mhm.
That's a really that's a different perspective that I've never really thought about because it's always, yeah, these two people have a problem. They need to sit down and talk it through. I feel like that's what's also taught in school, right? Is, oh, Johnny and Billy were fighting. What were they fighting about? Take them to the principal's office. They mediate. And then it's like, okay, done. And so I guess anyways, it's kind of like it's a really good perspective to look at it because we are not just two people. We are our environment. And that environment that we're in contributes to the relationship that those two people have.
Yeah,
And so if the environment is toxic or you have a leader or a manager who likes to create competition or whatever other reasons that there could be, those things can contribute to the workplace issues that are occurring.
absolutely. I think that, like, my approach around those things, which is in terms of systems thinking and leader
Mm.
as kind of a context setter and sense maker. That all comes from my background in terms of working in strategy and working in innovation and being a commercially oriented coach. So I'm not a business
Mhm.
coach, right? I'm not going to teach anybody sales techniques, but the context of
No,
what
no.
I do is set commercially. That's
Well,
that's my way of bringing together the constellation of my background to bring value to
I
clients. And again, that's not going to be the way other people approach it because that's not their background. But I think playing to what you know, playing to your strengths, and bringing those in a way that matches the kind of people or the kind of markets or the kind of places that you want to work with. I think that's kind of the lesson underneath all of that for me is go
yeah.
go where you can bring all of you because that's where the value is.
Yeah. That's a good point of go where you can bring all of you. Um I wonder with when it comes to coaching, right? Because you are not most often I find that coaches are not part of a bigger infrastructure
Hmm.
or of a larger practice. They're generally solopreneurs, single, however you want to call it, right?
Hmm.
They're them by themselves trying to do the whole thing, right?
Mm.
And as a business owner, you have to think about your bottom line.
Hmm.
You have to think about where are my next clients coming in from and all of these different things. And so for the coaches who might be struggling, how do they still bring all of themselves into that space when all this other stuff is also going on?
Yeah, it's tough. And I don't know that there's an easy answer. I think that, the kind of the exercise that I always lean back into when I feel like I'm being pulled away from where I want to be is, how am I spending my time? What's
Mhm.
in the calendar? What have I done? Even if it's like, what have I done this week? Have I done the things that actually have a direct link with the things I say I want?
Right.
And if the answer is yes, then great. If the answer is no, then what do I need to do to fix that?
Right. And that circles back to this whole idea about reflection,
Hmm.
I think, because there are a couple of coaches who I've spoken to uh, who do the coaching apps, right?
Hmm.
They're on there, they're coaching
Hmm.
people through that, um, which I think is fine. But then if that is your primary source of income, there's a certain cap to what you're able to earn.
Hmm.
And depending on where you live, that may be okay. But if you live in a more expensive part of the world, right, then that makes life difficult because you're capped. And so you have to spend more time, spend more hours coaching people so that you can sustain your life.
Hmm.
And where I'm trying to go with this, I think, is how do we help coaches who want to help people? Because I think that is the main reason many coaches get into the business. They want to help others. How do we help coaches to create sustainable businesses so that they can actually give more of themselves to their clients? And how do we make sure that, and bringing back this whole thing to the reflection is, as you're working, because you're so busy, it's hard to find time for reflection
Mm.
because the big part of this goal is to talk with coaches about their stories and how they got into it and how they're helping
Yeah.
people, but also to help coaches to kind of get out of that. I want to call it the rat race because for some coaches it is, so that they can be able to have that time to reflect and to think about what is a business that I want to make and the life I want to have, but also so that they can give 100% themselves to that client that they're trying to help.
Yeah. And, I think
Um,
I, I hesitate to say, these are the things I do. You should do what I do. That, like that. I don't think that's the case, but I can share with you two things that I do every week that create the space for reflection. One is I
mhm.
have a half an hour set aside every Friday morning where I go to a group journaling Zoom session, and there
Oh,
are three of us who meet every Friday morning for 30 minutes, and
mhm.
it's entirely unstructured. We get together at the beginning and we say, "Hello, how are you? How was your week? Great. Let's set the timer for 20 minutes. Videos off, audio off." Journal for 20 minutes. We come back together and we reflect on the reflecting. How did that go? What did you uncover this week? Really
Okay.
quick, really valuable in terms of like return on investment on that time. That's
Mhm.
super unlocking, I think, for me, and I think for the other two also. We've been doing it for multiple years, and we keep showing up, so I think we're all getting value out of that. Um, the
Yeah.
other thing that I do is I do an hour long, or 45 minutes to an hour, one-on-one peer coaching, peer mentoring session with another
Mhm.
coach every week.
Mm.
So it's coach the
Okay.
coach kind of stuff. And in again, usually quite unstructured, but the general topics we'll cover off are how are you? We work by ourselves most of the time, so having someone say how are you is a helpful thing. Have you had any tough client conversations this week that you want to unpack? Do you need help thinking through an approach with specific engagements? And then what are you doing in terms of business development and in terms of running your business that you might need help with? And we do that every week. And also twice a year, we get together for kind of longer, what we loosely call strategy sessions, strategy and planning sessions. And we guide each other through that. And I think that that rhythm, that structure, that discipline with someone that you really trust and that you're happy to kind of be vulnerable with is super helpful.
And I think those are two huge pieces of advice, I think. One is taking the time to spend intentionally to reflect and to write. But the other one is having another coach who you can coach and they can coach you. And it sounds like you're also kind of keeping each other accountable in terms of your business practices and your development of your
Very
businesses.
much.
And another coach I was speaking with earlier this week, he was saying, yeah, if you're a coach who doesn't have a coach, you should kind of reconsider being a
Mm-hmm.
coach. And so this is kind of, we'll see. I'll talk to more coaches, but this may be like a very simple key to unlocking how to help other coaches is building a community, having that relationship of accountability on how to build and develop your business, having somebody else to talk to you about issues and problems. Because when you're building a business by yourself, very often you're in a silo.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you get out of that silo? It can, because that in itself can be very mentally draining and difficult, because who do you share with and who can relate with you? And, there's the whole other, that's a whole like another episode to like uncover, like just going through the struggles of building a business. And if you don't have somebody there with you, the level of difficulty and challenge that is, because it can feel like a mountain's on top of you.
Absolutely. And I think if I was kind of wrapping an umbrella around it, I would talk about finding your tribe. And your tribe doesn't have to be,
You bro-
20 people. Your tribe can be 2 people. But it is about finding
bro-
those people that you trust, that, you have kind of mutual interest in helping each other, and that you just feel really good fit with. And, sometimes those people will come from where you did your coach training, from whatever institute you've chosen. Some will come from your global accreditation, your ICFs, your EMCCs, depending again. For different people,
yeah,
the tribes are going to emerge from different places, but I think the key is to keep looking until you find one.
that's very good. Um, yeah, we're like, people are communal. We need other people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the majority of the population, is we need to be in community and have accountability. And without that, it makes everything just harder. So
And
thank you for that.
and
That
riskier,
I think that's really
actually. Like if you think about the time as a coach, the time you spend with people, a lot of the time you spend is with clients. And
cool.
at least in theory, your job is to be there for them. It's not their job to be there for you. And if you don't have the right
Mm,
support structures and the right tribe around you, the risk is that when you show up to the clients, it becomes about you, not about them. Because you haven't got a place to
mm.
put you, and you haven't got a place for you to be valued and for you to get the support you need. And so you place it in the wrong spot.
I think that's so valuable, because I mean the job of being a coach, a leadership or executive coach, is to be there for the client and to deliver value to them, not for them to do the reverse.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, before we wrap up, I want to go into a little bit more about your business. Um, kind of cover a couple of different things in there. Um, so currently you're running your coaching business as a solo coaching business, correct?
Correct.
And so how do you manage all of those different pieces and parts of the business outside of the actual coaching? When it comes to, I don't know, like website or accounting, marketing, how do you go about doing those things?
I do my very best to keep it as simple as I possibly can. I try so I try and do the things that I think are important for me to do and get help from others when I think there are things that aren't important for me to do. So bookkeeping's a great example for me of I don't need to be the person doing my bookkeeping. So somebody else does that for me. Now, when I first started, I did it myself. I did it for myself the first couple of years because I wanted to understand it. I wanted to make sure I knew what was
Mhm.
happening. And so when I outsourced it, I could outsource it effectively. But now I have someone who does that for me. When it comes to website, I like writing and I like building. So most of the website kind of development and creation that I've done over the years, I've done myself. It doesn't make it the most beautiful, I got to tell you, because like design is not necessarily my forte. But when I went through the process of if I outsource copywriting, it's going to take more of me to outsource the copywriting and for someone to get to know my voice than to do it
Right.
myself. And particularly now with AI. And again, like AI is changing that game, I mean, ridiculously, in good ways and bad. Uh,
Mhm.
and I think that, I will invest in tools when I think the tools are a good investment in terms of the trade-off of time and efficiency. But for a lot of the stuff I do in terms of client tracking, sales tracking, simple spreadsheets are enough for me because my business is simple. So I don't spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on stuff that I don't need.
That's great. Um, because so you're able to keep it simple and streamlined because that's the business that you've designed. Can I ask then, because also keeping things simple is also, I would assume, also means in terms of the number of people you work with within a year
Mm-hmm.
isn't going to be in like the double or triple digits, right? Or
It's
I don't
it's in the
know.
double. It's not in the triple. I mean,
Okay.
unless you count. So some of my work is facilitation work. And so I'm doing
Hmm.
workshops with teams. And so if you counted all of that,
Okay.
then you'd be in the
Okay.
triples. But if you're talking exclusively about the one-on-one work that I do, yeah, it's double digits for sure.
Double digits. Okay. And I asked what the range is for how many leaders you work with on average per year.
It's going to depend. Like it's been up to I think it's been up to 60, and it's been down to 20. But I think it depends on what the engagement is. For some people, they're meeting with me every
Okay.
week.
Yeah.
Some people are only meeting with me once a month. So there's lots of flex
Right.
in there for the numbers to move based on the nature of the
Okay.
engagement. And I
Okay.
don't think there's a right number. I think there's a right
Right.
mix of work,
I,
but not the right number of
yeah.
clients.
Right. Because it depends on what kind of work you're doing with the clients, because
Hmm.
different types of
Hmm.
packages. I would just say, for me, 60 sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
With so being able to manage that through a spreadsheet, I would love to see what your spreadsheet looks like, because that's. But I will we'll keep that as your trade secret.
Yeah.
Um.
It's very, I think it's deceptively simple, right? It's all about who am
Mhm.
I working with? How many sessions do they, have they booked and paid for? And how many have they utilized?
Mm.
Where am I at in the
Okay.
in the
Yeah.
progression of engagement? Like my notes for the meetings and things like that, they sit in a different place. It's a different purpose.
Yeah.
But in terms of who's at what stage of their life cycle with me, that's pretty easy to maintain in a spreadsheet.
Okay. So then you're also maintain like when those meetings occurred. Um, so the simple version of that is here's the leader. How many engagements we're doing. This is how many engagements we've had. These are the when we had those
Mm-hmm.
meetings. Okay, yeah, simple.
Mm-hmm.
Are you also so then? It sounds like you don't really do like traditional like email marketing or something like that in terms of
Very little. So I have a newsletter that I send out. I have
that?
articles that I write. And I've toyed with, the strategies of that and what it does or doesn't do for my business. You know, as I
Yeah,
said, I like to write. So writing things like that doesn't, it's like, it's fine.
yeah,
But it's never like, that's not been my growth engine.
yeah. So what has been your growth engine then?
Personal relationships, referral.
Okay. Okay.
99.9% of my business has come from personal relationships, referrals, and repeat
Mhm.
business.
Mm. So you're very good at building relationships and maintaining them.
I try very hard.
So yeah. And I think, yeah, if you're very good at doing that, I know there's this guy who can't remember his name, um, but he's just saying building out your network and creating a system to help you to remember to maintain
Hmm.
relationships. His whole thing was dig the well deep so that when you needed water, you can
Nice.
you have it. And so if you don't spend the time building and developing the relationships, then you kind of don't have a business.
Hmm.
But if you spend your time continually developing and building those relationships, delivering on the value that you provide to your
Mm.
leaders, to your customers and clients, they see that and appreciate that and are more than happy to recommend you to others and refer them to you. And I think that's like the best marketing, right?
The cheapest. I mean, it costs you a lot in terms of time, right? But when you're interested in people and you like those relationships and they like you, it doesn't feel like it's a cost
Yeah.
because it's joyful having those great conversations. The other thing too is you never know where something's going to come from or when it's going to come. I had
Agreed.
somebody call me and ask me to do a piece of work recently who, I knew 10 years ago and I hadn't really had a lot to do with her in the 10 years since. And she called me and she said, "Oh, I follow everything you do on LinkedIn." I was like, "Well, you've never liked or commented on anything I've done. I follow everything you do on LinkedIn. I really like what you talk about. And I've got this piece of work, and I'm not sure it's right in your wheelhouse, but I'd like to ask you if it's something you'd be willing to do." And you know what? It was super interesting, and we ended up working together and delivering it, and I loved it. And she wasn't on my, she wasn't on my BD radar, and that kind of work wasn't on my
Mm.
radar. Um,
Yeah.
but if you put yourself in the situation for people to think about you in a way that
Yeah.
that helps them link you to things, it makes the job a lot
Yeah.
easier.
So then, so your newsletters, you have your newsletters, you have your email list, and so those also build visibility for yourself
Hmm.
as well as your
Hmm.
relationships. I think that's also very important then because I agree. Like if you can build out your relationships well, you can do a lot in referrals. The concern always for me is uh, what happens if those referrals stop,
Yep.
right? And then, but if you are also in combination from building those relationships, also visible on LinkedIn, or you have your website that's getting good traffic and your people can see what you're writing, it creates visibility for you, what you are doing and what your expertise is in. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And I would say, like, what you described about worrying that the referrals are going to stop, the risk
Mm.
kicks in before they stop. The risk is they're unpredictable. Like, like
Mm.
you can't call on them when you need them. They come when they come,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so there is something here about, how do you build and design the business to give you a platform of security? What's the work you do that gives you security so that the bumps in the In the new work or the bumps in the in the revenue, you can ride them out because it's not. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not smooth. It's not at all smooth.
Right. I mean, you were just saying you've had years where it's 20 to 60,
Hmm.
and that's I would imagine your income is fluctuating when it's like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Now the 20 could be like that. Could be three companies all giving me, you know, 6, 7
Yeah.
people and getting me to do training and facilitation and getting me to do a whole lot of stuff. So 20 doesn't necessarily mean less revenue than 60.
Yes. Again, very good point. It all depends on the service and the way you're designing your packages
Mhm.
and your coaching, right?
Mhm.
Because you could be doing group coaching, you could be coaching the CEO, and if you're coaching a CEO, you should definitely be getting paid more than if you're paying an emerging leader.
Mhm.
So there's also like if you're coaching 20 of the top CEOs globally, then I would imagine that's a very good year.
Yeah, that's not what I'm doing. Let's just be clear about that. But yes, that would be an exceptional year.
Yeah. I kind of want to just wrap up with one question, which would be for coaches who are still kind of figuring out their business, or coaches who are just starting and getting into this coaching in their first 1 or 2 years. What advice would you give them if they were here right now?
Do what you love. Find the people. Work with the people who love what you do, because they're the ones that come back. Um, and keep going. Like even if it is what you love, just keep going.
Mm.
Right? I think that's it.
Now, thank you so much for this. Thank you for being here on the podcast and for your time. I'm so grateful to have met you through this, and for just this time to just learn from you and learn from your history and your experiences. Thank you so
I've
much.
loved talking to you. This will not be our last conversation, I'm sure.
Wonderful. I'm excited to continue building this relationship.
Me too. Thanks, David.